Okay, everybody, good afternoon. I lost a bet in the break, so Lisa will not be speaking now, and now you're all stuck with me. That's how it happens. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for those of you that have had near A+ attendance this week. We are, around to the last final official session of the day, besides the mixer that we have a little bit later about student-run studios. So please come join us for that. Housekeeping notes: we are recording. Please, if you have no underwear, don't stand up on, during the call is going, because we want to make sure that we keep this PG and academic. We are having the live transcript features on. So if you have issues understanding weird English like mine, just turn it on and hopefully the feature will help you out. We are really excited. We have a very interesting session this afternoon. Let me tell you the plan. We want to involve all of you. Lisa Hammershaimb is here. She will be making a thesis statement. She will be sharing with us a few minutes, but then the idea is for this session to become interactive. So please, we're gonna be encouraging for all of you to turn off your mics. Let's have a chat and have a conversation. But before I turn it over to Lisa, I wanna also introduce Ric Wilson. He is our community manager for the session today. Ric will be managing and looking for the raise hand feature. Yes, we are encouraging you to turn off the mics, but this is not a rally. So please use the raise hand feature so that we can keep order and we can listen to each other. So without further ado, I leave you with Lisa Hammershaimb. Lisa, all yours.
All right, well, thank you so much for that great introduction. And let me share my screen. Is it all good? Are we all seeing things? Is that good? Excellent.
All good.
Perfect. All right, well, hello and welcome. My name is Lisa Hammershaimb, and I'm so glad that you have persisted to the almost end of conference day 4. And again, A+ to many of you for almost perfect attendance. That's great. So yeah, we're gonna get into looking forward, looking back, looking forward, I guess. Mapping online tool usage that supported studio learning and emergency remote teaching. So before I get into the presentation, I just really wanted to thank the organizers for ShiftED, particularly Lisa and Alberto. You guys are incredible, and I'm sure, I can't see everybody, but I'm sure there's like applause and hearts and all the good things appearing on screens everywhere right now. You guys deserve the highest of high fives, as well as the DEC committee. You've just really championed connections this week, and you've remained so positive and energetic through it all. Lisa, the bopping GIF, I think that is going to make me smile for the rest of the year. Every time I see it, I feel so much pure joy, and it makes me very happy. And I know it's been a very difficult season for all of us. So thank you guys so much. And I know everybody here is probably feeling the same thing. Okay, so now for a little agenda, so we know where we're headed. I'm going to begin with a little bit about me, followed by a little bit about the larger project. And then from there is going to be the panel, which you all are the panel, if you didn't know that. So you're going to do amazing, trust me. Okay, so here I am, and this is my little Yorkshire Terrier, Ruby Joy. I'm an adjunct faculty member teaching graphic and web design with Bellevue University. And until very recently, I was also a full-time instructional designer, creating online learning experiences for higher ed. I'm currently looking for more work. So shameless plug, if you know anyone who needs an instructional designer, any adjunct work, anyone that needs a teammate that has a cute dog that dresses in clothes, I am open. Here's my email address, and I would love to chat. And for those of you too who have sent me things that you're hiring, thank you so much. It's been such a nice thing to see the community support in the DEC in this time where I've been completely in transition. So it's been quite nice. I'm also a doctor of education, kind of fun. And my research specifically investigates the intersection between graphic design, studio pedagogy, and online learning. So until 2020 or so, my research actually felt very niche because online learning and graphic design didn't really mingle very much. But then, unfortunately, we all know how that played out. And yeah, here we are today. So anyway, I met with Lisa shortly after I first saw the info coming out about the ShiftED happening. We had a great conversation about the focus of ShiftED And at one point we realized that we actually had very similar research ideas. We were both kind of wanting to somehow map or track how design education had shifted over the course of the last year. So ShiftED, haha. Unfortunately, one of the Lisas was planning a conference and had no time to explore these ideas. But the good news is that I was all over it. And so I said, hey, I can, design the study and start moving it forward. And, we can kind of see where it goes from there. So main research question for this study is, how did graphic design educators use the internet or online tools to enact studio pedagogy during emergency remote learning? And basically, this is just an academic-y way of saying, what were you all doing when you had to make that initial shift to meeting in person, meeting face-to-face, meeting in your comfortable places, and suddenly everybody was at home, everything was decentralized. Like, how did you all make it work? And, in addition to probably panicking and going a little crazy, what were the actual nuts and bolts of things that you did? And how did you kind of go through this era? And potentially, moving forward, we still might be in this era or moving into it as well. So project goals are to gather stories to mark this unique time, then map tool usage to note both what did work and then also what didn't, and then distill information learned to better understand how online tools can inform future teaching and also program delivery. So remote learning has its issues. Most likely, a lot of programs will probably go back to how they were, maybe whenever this is nearing the end, which who knows when that will be. But I do think this is a really unique time to be working in education. And I know at the very beginning of the session of, well, I guess of ShiftED, Lisa noted that this was really a watershed moment. And I think that that's very true, because no matter what happens, people are going to look back at this era in education and this era in design education in particular and say like, wow, look at what those people did. Look at what new things grew out of that. So I think that even though it's tricky, we're quite fortunate to be where we are. So practical parts of the survey, or ways that we're going to gather data and kind of share it, are through surveys, then through interviews, focus groups, etc. And then also a written report, which is most likely going to get added to the DEC research collection, which I hear is quite extensive, and I've actually seen that as well. So it should be a good external resource. So speaking of survey, if you haven't taken the survey yet, be sure that you do that. Here's the link. I know it's a picture of a link, so you can't do anything with it, but the link is everywhere in Slack. And I'll also post it to the chat at some point during this session. So if you haven't taken it, you can kind of multitask and get in there. It's a pretty easy survey. It's just kind of a way that I'm hoping to get some quantitative metrics about what people were doing, kind of behaviors, how that was moving forward, etc. So now that you have the grand overview, it is the time for you all to become the panelists. And we are going to shift from me just presenting this to really a time of collaboration. So basically what I would love to hear from you all, and this is just kind of like getting us kicked off, because if you have other things you want to share, as long as it's polite and on topic, I'm all for it. But I want you to think back to your teaching practice since the lockdowns occurred in spring 2020, and knowing what you know now regarding online tools, delivery, student preference, personal energy levels, all the sorts of things. What advice would you give your past self? Or perhaps, knowing what we know now, what advice would you give your future self as you move into the new school year? And I'm also very curious, per the study, what worked really well for you as far as the kind of transitioning to online, using online tools, using the internet, etc. And then what also didn't work well? What was a failure, but it seemed like a good idea, that sort of thing. So I'd encourage you all to, open your microphones, raise your hands, type in the chat, do whatever it is you are comfortable doing, but really treat the remainder of this session as a time for you to share ideas to help empower others, which has been, I think, a big, key for this whole conference. And then also to see too how other people have ideas that maybe you never thought of that you might be able to incorporate in the future in some way, and kind of see what comes from that. And also, if you have any questions for me, I will confess, I am actually only an online teacher. I don't really have any face-to-face experience, so I don't have a lot to bring to how this has shifted. But I mean, if you have any questions about the study or who I am, I'd be happy to answer those as well. So yeah, I guess I will leave this slide up for maybe just a little bit. And then I think at some point I'll stop sharing so we can, just kind of look at each other in gallery view, and it will feel a little bit more normal than it does now. So yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, well, I'll break off the ice then. I don't know if it fits in what worked and what didn't work at all, but the black screens in Zoom don't work, and I'm surprised that Zoom hasn't yet figured out like an educator mode where that can be somehow handled. But it gets really frustrating to be speaking to a black screen, and visual cues are important to me, particularly as a Latin person. So I use my hands. I am very animated, and I take students, posture, and seeing students on their bed lying on a pillow with their eyes switching. I mean, but not being able to kind of affect that in any way was frustrating. And I've always envisioned, Zoom should have an educator mode. You click on it, and the interface changes in a way where it provides some kind of cue. It's maybe something related about background noise or something, and then I get graphics, and at least I know that people are there. But the whole being muted on a black screen made me teach in isolation. And for those of you that know me, I mean, being interactive in the conversation is really important to me. So Zoom worked well, of course. I was able to teach online. I was able to teach remotely. That was all great, but that part of the experience of using Zoom isolated me in not a good state of an emotional well-being.
If I may, I agree with what Alberto has just said in terms of not receiving them, not having the feedback in terms of expressions or hands or even, passing, showing boredom or whatever emotion. So you don't really know how effective you are being as when you are in the classroom, that you can see them right face to face and even talk directly to them. But I would like to share something that it could be a fantastic topic to research. Is that the first time I taught online was in 2018, and I taught a course that is blogging beyond the basics. That's the name of it, and it was completely asynchronic. That's the word, right? When you are not with the students, it was all online. And that was the first time that I was teaching that course. And at the end of the semester, when I had the student evaluations, the response of the students, those have been the highest that I have ever had where I work. And I've been there for 16 years. Actually, yesterday was the anniversary. And compared to the course that I am a specialist, that I have been doing that for decades, it's still a challenge. And the students they aren't as happy as they were when they had never seen me. They haven't heard me. They don't know who I am, just words. So the communication that was through text was much more effective. And they wrote things like how compassionate I was, how understanding I was, how many tools I have provided. And then when I am face to face and they look at me and they hear my accent, that was not the experience. So what I learned is that when they don't see me, I am a different person. So I would like to study that. I don't know. I know that this is additional information to what you are asking right now, but that would be something also interesting to consider.
Yeah, I mean, let me
Okay.
just jump in 1 second. The idea of who we are in different spaces, it is such a fascinating thing to think about, because who we are versus how people perceive us. And, you know, when we transfer ourselves, kind of translate who we are and what changes and what doesn't. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I could speak up. Is that okay?
Robert, give me 1 second.
Yeah,
let's
sure.
have Zachary and then Scott, Prescott, because they have their hands up. And
Oh,
so if you could
okay.
just raise your hand, I apologize, but yeah, we have a system.
Oh, no
to try
worries.
to
I'll do that.
Okay.
I just wanted to go back to what Alberto was saying about the, you know, the black boxes and, you know, the names but no faces kind of thing on Zoom. During times when I would do synchronous classes, I struggled so much in teaching with teaching in isolation because everybody had their cameras off. And the main thing I struggled with was I really wanted them to be present, and I really wanted them to, like, I, you know, tried to communicate. I don't care what your living situation, I don't care where you're coming from. You could be in the bathroom, do not care. I just want to, like, know you exist in a physical form and are, you know, that, you know, with us. I love seeing kids. I love seeing cats. I love the, you know, I'm invading your home, and I recognize that, and I appreciate the difficulty that is. But I struggled with communicating that. I never forced my students to turn on cameras because that's not my place. It was something that I felt very strongly about, that they needed to have the autonomy in their own space to control what little they could of the classroom. And if they had a child literally crawling all over them during the session, I didn't want them to feel like they were distracting the class, you know, through that. So it was hard on one end to say, personally, I need you to be on cameras because I need that sort of interaction with the student. I need some you know, ability to check in and check for understanding, but also respecting the boundaries of the fact that I'm not supposed to be in your home. I should never be. We should never have been put in this situation, and I don't want you to feel like I'm invading that space. It was emotionally hard to teach online. Through text and everything, that's fine. Online courses, we do the text responses, but having a synchronous, having the time where I can actually speak to my students and not see them was rough emotionally and mentally. So I just, like, I wanted to put that out there, like, as something that didn't work. I'm not sure how we fix that in any sort of way. I did try to get my students to put up pictures of themselves, like, as the minimal requirement for the course. And still I got, you know, like, memes, which I thought were great and fun, and I could identify students from them, but that's not the same as a responsive sort of classroom. So putting that out there.
It's my turn.
Prescott.
Yeah. So I echo a lot of what's been shared so far. And I mean, we for these synchronous classes in Zoom, I had a lot of those same experiences. I'm not sure where the university officially stands, but I would always harangue my students, like, please turn your cameras on. Like, come on, folks. And we got there in the end. Maybe one or two people didn't have a camera or had low bandwidth or something. But I wanted to say, like, one thing I learned or sort of reinforced is that everything is a performance, right? And appearing on camera, I mean, yeah, it's, you know, we're not going to win the Academy Award, but you got to consider your lighting and your sound and a little bit about what you're wearing, so you're not distracting people and what's behind you. And just those small considerations, I think, make the student experience, the classroom experience, more interesting and more purposeful. That instead of just turning up in my pajamas and be, okay, everyone, let's do this thing, that I was taking it a little more seriously and really considering, like you were saying, the hand gestures. And I got better. I watched videos of myself early, and I had my eye contact was all over the place. And by the end, I really figured out how to perform to the camera, as it were. And also one of the positive side effects, and frankly, I think this may be the only positive side effect from the past year and a half, is that I have the videos, I have the recordings, and in one of my classes, my senior portfolio classes, I have now a edited, purpose-built video with diagrams and with outside graphics and everything for each of the topics. So the online students, like I have asynchronous online students as well, they now have the benefit of that additional content. And it's huge. I mean, it's a class that used to be essentially a series of blog posts, and now it's video conversations with custom editing, and transcripts are sort of slowly coming in. So that's been a real positive side effect, is that having the videos has been huge in terms of content production. And I missed the thing yesterday about writing a book, but oh, you could bet I'm gonna use some of those videos and sort of make applesauce out of this this orchard of apple trees. And the one last thing was that also, or about videos again, is that I have to, I think this happens all the time, I have to hand off one of my classes to a new faculty member, which is a little bit heartbreaking. But one of the things I told her, I'm like, I have a year's worth of videos.
Mhm.
If you don't know what this activity is, I'll send you the link. Like, please use it as a resource. So if you have any of the videos from the last year, think about a second look about what you can do with those. And even if it's a transcription, you give a student extra credit to produce the transcription, depending on what you might use it for.
Right, Robert, I think you were up.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, I've been teaching for about 20 years now. And my first teaching gig, we probably all could reflect on that, right? Like walk into a college classroom. And I remember calling my wife after my first day of teaching and go, I think I just taught my first class. I was just like totally overwhelmed and totally energized. And, and I found that same kind of return feeling of being totally energized happened again in the remote world. I was pleasantly surprised by that. I personally found it to be highly interactive, totally creative, exciting, experimenting with new technologies, trying to find ways to connect with my students connecting with students in a different way than in the classroom, connecting with me inside of the class time, outside of the class time. I echo what Prescott said. I think he used the word, everything's a little bit of a performance. And I would second that. And I actually loved that part of it. I think, maybe we're all a little like this, but I'm a bit of I'm kind of an introvert at times. And then certain people know me in another part of my life and they're like, no, you're not like that at all. So there's this like introverted, extroverted person. And I found that they were both alive and well in this interactive online Zoom enhanced teaching, where I found myself being totally like myself as an instructor in a different way than I find myself sometimes in the classroom. And I found that students really, like I was just doing what I love to do. And I was getting different results in this environment. I just found it to be really satisfying in a way. I had no problem with attendance. 10 o'clock meant 10 o'clock. I was beautiful. Everybody showed up. And there wasn't distractions. We all know from teaching, as soon as that door's jiggling or somebody's looking through the window or you hear a knock or somebody comes in, none of that. And even if they were late, it just was more silent in the class. I have 105 minutes with my students twice a week. Those 105 minutes were tightly orchestrated in ways that I wasn't doing when I was in person. 4 minutes was 4 minutes, 8 minutes was 8 minutes. My breakout sessions were timed. In fact, I built at the beginning of the classes this 105-minute kind of curriculum. And I thought about it, I'm not a musician, but I always thought, hey, it would be really cool to like run a concert, and like be a musician and set up a playlist. And, so each class became a 105-minute playlist. I love music, so I would do a lot of stuff with music. Students would come into my room. I teach a lot of design history, so I draw, as they're waiting in their rooms, I would like draw a theme-based playlist that I'd make. They'd listen and then chat about it for the first couple minutes of class. Then that led to this and led to that and led to that, usually right up until the very end. So, I was an advocate for this online teaching. And in fact, I would like to do that kind of exclusively in the future. So they were just kind of some of my thoughts about this.
Gary, you're up.
Yeah, I definitely echo a lot of the things that people have been saying so far. Alberto, when you said, teaching the black squares is rough, that quickly forced me to go asynchronous with everything. And I just couldn't do it, right? Like the way I teach and the way I talk is all about bouncing off of other people. And I just couldn't talk to the void. And then I also realized pretty quickly that a lot of we had international students that went home, that look at people like in Brazil and Australia who like, I'm not going to tell them 10 a.m. like Eastern time, you got to be here, because who knows what the hell time that is in Australia. So I thought it was unfair to do that. And then I also thought, if you're going to be online, like be real about it. And I think asynchronous is the only way to be fairly online. Like people are going to have kids, or we had a huge issue with our student population. Like they sent home during the spring of 2020 and they just got jobs. They just started working. They didn't like hang out and do their work or do their schoolwork. They like got 9 to 5s or whatever, or like Burger King. And so to be fair, I think that they should just be able to get to their work when they could. So I thought asynchronous was the best route. I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of people outside of academia, like I posted this thing last week. AOC posted a video talking about all kinds of political stuff, and she was wearing this really cool mask. And I commented and I said, like, I wonder what that mask is, because it seems like you could project better, and I'm a teacher, I love to learn. And I got all these comments from terrible people saying like, oh, you're just a lazy teacher who doesn't want to go back to work, stop wanting to wear, like, you don't want to wear masks, like just terrible stuff. So I think people need to know that teaching online is like 10 times harder than teaching in person. There's just so much more, it's not quite face-to-face, but there's so much more engagement time and the amount of emails and like meetings and stuff. And so I completely reject this idea of teachers are lazy and they don't want to go back to work in a lot of ways. So what did I find that was good? I use Google Meet instead of Zoom. Google Meet just tied in with my school as a Google school, so we use that. I think it worked really well. And one thing that I thought was really cool that I'll probably continue doing is I kind of did like a Twitch, Twitch, Reddit, ask me anything, like let's hang out and watch me grade thing. So like I'd pull up their assignments and I'd just be grading, and they'd be watching, and we would just talk about the decisions I was making about the grading and critiquing, and it seemed like they were getting a lot of value out of that. And I'll probably do like virtual office hours from now on too. At least be like, even if I sit in my office on campus, I'll still be like, hey, we can Zoom if you don't feel like coming to my office, So that's all I got.
I gotta say some of the positive things. I was able to have an ever-changing roster of guests and critiquers in the class. Every critique in the semester, I brought in people from all over the world, from Spain. David came from California, a lot of them US colleagues from Argentina. And I found out that, even in the evaluation, students suddenly realized, they wrote that they would have never been in front of that people wouldn't have been to doing it in Zoom. And that's totally correct, because if I were to have been in a classroom, I would have brought a guest on a projector or a TV, It's not the same that we're engaging with them one-on-one. And I found out that those sessions were really good. A lot of people wrote, of course, we had Debbie Millman in class. So although all the girls in the class were like, I never thought I was going to get a chance to speak with her. And, you know, we tend to forget that those are things that are important to a bigger generation. And I am eternally grateful that Zoom allowed me to do that because it allowed for multiple personalities, and it became less about me. A few sessions ago, we were talking about agency. And what I did, and I'll give you an example. So when Armin Witt came to class, I had everybody design a logo for Armin in only an hour and a half. And after they were all done, we emailed them to him. And when he came back, he made an impromptu critique of the logos that had been made for him. And then he once said, you know, this is my favorite. You can imagine a student thinking that Armin Witt thought that his logo was the favorite. I mean, it's one of those things, but I am grateful to have been able to do that via Zoom because there wouldn't have been an opportunity aside that to do so. Victor, you're up, then Ryan.
Thanks, Alberto. A couple of things based on what you said before I even get to my own comment. I think the idea of sprints, I do those hour-and-a-half things like you're mentioning. I think they're really, really helpful. And they're usually like an assignment I give at the beginning of the class, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, that they have to do within an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, however long the class is. And they hate it when they're students because they're the pressure. But that's always the assignments that when after they graduate, they come back and say, you know, those stupid sprints that you made us do, that actually helped me get the job because I had to do a test or something and I had to knock it out or whatever. And I've had so many students tell me that they love those sprints after they graduated. Another thing that I wanted to mention before I make my point is that in another conversation, we were talking about like students who have to compete with other designers who didn't go to school, formal education versus self-taught education and all that stuff. And I think what you did with all those speakers and bringing it in is one of the big things that faculty could bring in a formal education platform, is that we present those opportunities that might not be available to them otherwise. So that's one of the many things that I think we do as faculty, is what you ended up doing. But going back to the subject at hand, I've shared this with my DEC peeps before, but one of the things I started doing in the virtual classroom that I think I'm going to continue in the face-to-face in an effort to get them engaged, even if it's like an early morning class, I would ask, when I would take roll, I would ask a question of the day. And it could be like, it started off with being like, tell me one thing creative that you did over the weekend, to if you didn't have a career in creatives, what would you be doing? And they'd be like, I'd be a musician, I'd be an accountant, whatever. To I don't know, what's your favorite go-to dessert? I know one time we had an argument about it was a fun argument about the class was divided about which way do you pronounce GIF, right? And so they became, sometimes those answers would take up like an hour out of a 3-hour day, but it really started to get them engaged. People would turn off the cameras to answer and kind of like show something that they had in their room. To the point that sometimes students were late and I could see in the chat, like, did I miss a question? What's a question? What are we talking about? And in a lot of ways, that was like the highlight of the class for some people, because they would enjoy that one of the things I think they were lacking, especially early on, is that sense of community. So the fact that they were kind of like bantering about the pronunciation of GIF or who's, you know, whose side of Civil War were you on? Were you on Iron Man's or Captain America's, and why? You know, that kind of banter, even if it had nothing to do with, sometimes it had to do specifically with graphic designs, and sometimes it had to do with nothing at all other than my own amusement. But I think it was just kind of like that banter of community that really helped it on. So I think I'm going to continue that in the face-to-face atmosphere.
All right, Ryan.
All right, I hope, can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We use Zoom and my campus uses Moodle. I know some of you have been venting about Moodle. I have a 3-year-old with me, so I apologize. But our the studio that I oversee, we have a WordPress site, and I would add private pages and students could add links and share stuff. And that seemed to be a really positive experience that I plan to continue doing, probably per class. The other thing, similar to what Gary mentioned for office hours, I actually held happy hours for my students. We didn't really talk about them being adult beverage happy hours, but we still hosted them in a way that it was a positive space for us to just hang out and chat. And it was super helpful for the students to get feedback from each other if they needed it, or if they weren't in a class with someone this semester and they wanted to talk to that group of students. It was a really positive environment. And then the last thing, I had a list of topics for one of my professional practice classes that I normally would have a schedule for my own sanity. And I got rid of the schedule, and I would just ask them at the start of each class, what topic are you most excited to hear about today? And kind of figure out throughout the semester where we were at with our project. If they didn't really want to hear about contracts and negotiating and legal stuff, what else would they want to actually hear about that day? And that worked out really well. There were even some topics that I didn't have lectures prepared for, but I would go back and prepare new content and add in links of technology or ways for them to do time tracking. And so that ended up being something that I haven't done that way in the past, but it worked out really well. And the students are still accessing those links now. So helpful for me not to have that follow up during the summer of, hey, where's that contract that you gave us? Or where is that information? So just a couple things.
So Ryan, you had your hand up. No.
I just put it back down.
No, thank you.
So let me ask everybody something. We've been talking a lot about how we use technology for the students. How did all of you use it for your faculty peers? Like, how did communication happen with other colleagues? Because I, for example, don't have that experience because I am a one-off teacher. I teach a course and I'm out, so I'm not part of that. But I'm curious as to how the infrastructures of the departments adapted to that. I mean, because from a studio perspective, I mean, we migrated to Slack in my studio. We migrated to that, and Slack became the world. And I'm so fed up with Slack right now, just because it's been my world for almost 2 years now. But I'm curious to see what others happen in terms of engagement that way.
Victor. Victor's first.
Thank you, Rick. All our meetings, faculty meetings, like I mentioned in the chat, went to Zoom as well. And I also mentioned that a lot of the colleagues were kind of concerned about the cameras off, but even in the faculty meetings, a lot of the faculty cameras were off as well. We also use for certain projects with other areas of the university, we went to Teams, which was, but it just became this whole kind of like virtual communications, and only a skeleton crew was actually in the office, especially early on. Now everybody's there, but it's just kind of like the very similar way that we communicated with the students.
All right, Lisa, you want to go next?
Sure. So yeah, we also just use Zoom. I have a very, very shrinking small faculty in my department, and I'm the only designer. So I'm in an art department, art and art history. So we used Zoom for faculty meetings. We didn't have a lot of faculty meetings, and that actually worked really well. It was kind of nice, instead of sitting around a conference table, to actually, I feel like they were more efficient in some ways. But what I also wanted to say is one nice thing we did because of the pandemic was we shifted our BA and BFA reviews of the students at the end to something on Zoom. And that was actually really lovely because, again, it leveled the playing field. The student could kind of present their work and then we could all talk about it kind of in the same space. And it felt just more egalitarian somehow, right? Or a little bit more equal. So we've actually decided that we might continue to do that even after the pandemic's over, because it was just such an efficient and lovely way to do that kind of process. So, those were some of the things, but we didn't do a Slack. I have a lot of faculty who would not be able to figure out Slack, I think, a lot of colleagues. So we didn't do that. And there's something else for us to talk about when we're done talking about this, that I would love to bring up again, is this idea of whether Slack and like Discord worked with students, because that's another topic I saw in the chat that might be good. But let's keep talking with colleagues. I'm done now.
All right, Robert, then David.
Yeah, thanks. I found that the communication amongst the college and my colleagues was primarily on Zoom. But we were running, I taught fully remote, and some of my colleagues were in hybrid. They were there certain days and remote and Zoom other days. I found that, and maybe it was just kind of the political kind of landscape that I'm working in, but I found that like the folks like myself who weren't there were because it's a small kind of residential campus is what the mantra is from our president, and there was a big desire to want to return to campus. And so I got a little bit of a sense that, hey, be careful not to fall in love with this online stuff too much, because it's not really what our mission is going to be going forward. So there was it was just such a strange feeling for me, because I was like born again here as a faculty, just loving it, knowing that that was probably going to end, and not necessarily, I don't know, it was different. It was like, I could tell there were certain faculty that were, just in the same position as me, but sort of had to be quiet about it, because that really wasn't the plan going forward. So the communication was a little stilted, but it was, as far as doing business as a department in the college, we were all able to do that. But I think some faculty were just a little bit maybe more quiet about their online life as an educator. So that may be unique just to my campus. I don't know if anybody else had that experience, but I found that it became something that usually is not there politically when we're all together on one campus.
It's all you, David.
Hello, everyone. Good to see people with video on and video off. Well, I have one comment actually going back to the student experience. I had a student who identified on the spectrum, and that student in the evaluations and comments said that they actually felt even more connected with their with the other students than in a normal in-person class experience. Felt like they got more feedback and they felt more connected. So I thought that actually was a great thing to realize. As far as Zoom and connecting with other faculty, we just had our faculty meetings. We just have, online. I think the challenge was keeping the faculty connected. We had a Slack that no one really used for faculty. For my students, it was super active. And I think part of it is if you're active with them on Slack, that kind of pulls them along. What was really effective, though, college-wide was last summer and fall, and even going into the spring, having meetings through we have a president's diversity steering group, and those meetings are usually closed and have a few representatives from different groups, faculty, staff, and students. We opened those meetings up, and so we would have 90 or 100 people from all over the college. We would have students, we'd have alumni, we have faculty come and participate, and we just would have those on a regular basis. And that actually was great for people to find a way to express and connect over the idea of Black Lives Matters and about DEIB, and to have a voice. So you would, plus normally when you're in a meeting at school, hard to schedule, you can't get to campus, we have 2 campuses. Here, we would just see this screen and just see all those faces, those little rectangles on that screen was fantastic. So that was a positive, I would say, as far as connecting via Zoom.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, Rick. Going back to Alberto's question regarding the faculty interaction, one thing too is that especially early on when everybody's trying to get used to it, our faculty did a really good job of helping each other out and how to figure out the setup to teach some of the classes that aren't as usually taught online, for instance, drawing or printmaking. So we'd have workshops and faculty meetings where one faculty would show the setup or arm that he built to be able to kind of like put a camera on and take pictures, or the setup of how they have in their bathrooms with the mirror that they're showing the students how to draw self-portraits and things like that. So there was a lot of those little workshops in our regular faculty meeting that really kind of helped everyone get their feet under them early on. And the other thing, as someone who was going through the tenure process, I went through my last year of the tenure process last year of COVID. They gave us the option of pushing it back 1 year if we wanted to, but I wanted to get it over with. So it made, especially when everybody was kind of like, again, especially early on, it made it easier to have impromptu meetings if we had questions about the tenure process or any questions about what we had to turn in. It was easier to ask for meetings than if we just meet up on Zoom. It's those of us who are going through the tenure process together to answer each other's questions. So I think those little pockets, in the same way that it was, we could invite outside people to come in, the communication just made it quicker to, instead of having to schedule a face-to-face call for these things, we just kind of like jumped on calls really easy. So in that case, the communication between faculty was really, really good and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Gary?
Yeah, I thought it was just worth mentioning that I think in-person classes, students seem to have an easier time falling through the cracks and not engaging, but online I felt like they were more likely to engage at least at a base level, which I thought was odd. To me, that's like opposite of what I thought was going to happen. I recorded my critiques, so I would screen record and pull up PDFs of their designs and just talk to myself and then post the video and then ask them to drop a comment giving their fellow classmates some help and advice and ask for specific help that they wanted. And everybody was just super on top of those comments. And so it was cool to see everyone had a voice, which is completely the opposite of what I thought was going to happen. So it's kind of cool.
All right, Zachary.
I started every semester. The first day of class was always a synchronous meeting at the designated class time. And I asked my students directly, what kind of class would you prefer? Synchronous, hybrid, asynchronous? Every single semester, to my shock, we've been doing this for a while now, they all asked for synchronous. They wanted to be in class. They wanted to be talking to me. I even asked, I was like, I have the lectures, I can record them, I can put them up, and they were like, no, please walk us through it. And I was just dumbfounded by all of that, because from all the studies that I was reading, don't keep them on Zoom too long, don't have them turn on their cameras. Everything was saying, keep them away from the computer if you possibly can. And I, had to, so every semester has been synchronous for me, and that was a shock. But I let the students choose, and they chose to do that. So I don't know what everybody else's experience was in that. Did you prescribe that, or was that a conversation? How did y'all go about it?
Zach, my experience was the same, and I had a 4-hour studio every Tuesday and Thursday. So it's 8 hours a week. And I would sometimes tell the students to leave early, and they would say, can you please leave the Zoom on, because we want to stay here. And so I did see, although contrary to Gary's experience, the being online, they fell through their cracks very easily. And somebody in the class asked about if they were using smoke screens. one day I decided to say fuck it, and I told everybody I want a class portrait. Everybody turn on the video, and people driving, there was a girl in a beauty salon, there was somebody in the mall, and but and I get it, right? And as not everybody will be excited, but I did have my VIP group of like 6 students that participated, engaged, and what I ended up doing is making my semester out of those that were indeed speaking, those that were engaging with me. But I'll never forget, because when she turned that woman when she turned on the thing, you could see the big dome from the beauty salon, so she was clearly like, oh shit, I am here, and he caught me. But again, I think we're all trying to do the best that we can this semester, these past few semesters, and it happened. So.
Nope. David, you're up.
Actually, I would like to hear from some folks who haven't spoken up, like Bonnie or Victoria or Lisa or Becky. So I'm going to give up my time.
Yield the balance of your time. Okay.
Yield time.
Okay, I have something that I could add. I have tried different approaches, and I tend to blame myself all the time, say, what have I done that is not working? And then I try, or I modified an approach, and then it's not working, or it's not working to the level that I would like, right? Because sometimes I hear my colleagues or other educators so happy, and everything is great, and wonderful. And I'm thinking, gee, but it's not wonderful where I am. It may be the definition of the word wonderful. I don't know. Maybe I have a different one. But it also has to do with how much investment the student has. I cannot, make a student who's not engaged with the subject matter or is not very interested to somehow magically make them, okay, this is exactly what I love this course, I love this instructor. So I think that we also need to think that when I had some really successful stories, students who stayed with me, students who I had one-on-one, and they would be very honest. And that to me was very positive. I had this student, a Black student, who would stay and say, I really like how you support other students that they are not, and I know I am not in the majority, and I have these issues, and we'll talk and stay. And that was to me very, very helpful. Not only from minority students, also students who were white, and they would say, I said, I don't understand. You come from the English department and you are so invested, right? And then surprises like that happen. And I think that we should also evaluate that not everybody is to have the same level of response, and it's not all the time about us. It's also how much they contribute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm not sure who was up first.
They show up in order. So Tuan P, it's next, yeah.
Building off of that about it's not about us, where I even feel, or I'm humbled that it's not even about education, in the sense of the school experience where they come this thing. I had a philosophical kind of crisis about it was depressing. I will say it was depressing because to teach where it felt like a contractual there, because I don't think university, or I hope this is not what it becomes, where they come purely for education, as in the transaction is just between me and them, and it's done. There's no campus life. I think that whole social component of people, it's like, I'm curious about relationships, about how do they meet people in this environment, to like, do they fully go on Tinder now? They don't even bother with face-to-face flirting, like, and meeting people in class, because that whole component just got wiped away. And I felt the energy, and it's like, and so, yeah, if university becomes this thing where it's like, yeah, we just go to this class, go to this Zoom class, leave, and there's no other world that's part of this thing that I can walk into, like walking campus and stuff. It's very I don't know, it's very dark.
Thank you, Anne.
A little bit hard to follow after hearing your experience and your concerns. I think I have sons that are this age, and just seeing how hard it's been, and they have, they have some options. They can ride their bikes places, they could meet people, but I think what I was hopeful of is, maybe this term was going to be different, but it seems like that the transition and the uncertainty continues, and we're transitioning to I don't know what, in person that may blow up for some people. I know hearing people from Florida, it sounds like that doesn't sound very sustainable very long. But I guess the one thing I'm trying to figure out is how can I keep experimenting and keep that aspect of teaching going this term. I don't want to go back to the way it was. Someone else that said was anyone else concerned about going back? I don't really want to go back in person. I don't think, to teach 100%. I want control to mess around. A little virtual, a little bit in person. Maybe this day, that day, I change it. And my favorite exercise, or one I did, is I did a walking Zoom call. We were doing nature and well-being. So I focused the whole term on nature and well-being, and it was research methods. So we used Mural, or at that point, but equivalent to Miro. But I think the part where we were outside with our phones, and we could only see 4 people up on the screen at a time. And there was people in LA, and it was 100 degrees. And I had people in, I think it was Colombia, and the bugs, her mother didn't want her to go out with the bugs. And there was a guy in China, it was 4 a.m. And we were still trying to do this class while we were moving through the Fens, which is near the campus in Boston where I teach. And to me, we just did impromptu things. And I just think that spirit of that day, it taught me, oh, I totally didn't think about where everybody else is and what they're up against. I didn't, and someone was in their backyard in New Jersey or something. I didn't think about anything. And I was such a risk, and I thought the whole thing was going to fail, but it was a fail for reasons I didn't anticipate, like 100 degrees in LA. And it was a win for reasons I didn't anticipate, in that the students gave each other assignments. Like, okay, everybody take a picture of, the sky around you, and then the people that were inside, because it was 4 a.m. in China, were looking at their ceiling, So I just feel like I want some more of that sense that we're all in this together, and that we collectively, between faculty and students, need to carve out exchanges and relationships that matter. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but that's what I'm dreaming of. That's all.
Thank you. Alberto?
Somebody in the chat asked how we use Miro. So I have a quick example to share. I taught a branding course where I needed students to learn how to do research. So what I ended up doing is I modeled the whole infrastructure, where I had them first research in ways that they would know. So the columns here are history, fun facts, something cool advertising, cool design, cool labels. And as you can see, I had them refine them a few times, but then we changed the topic, and then we went from chocolate to goat cheese. And then I used Shelley Evanson's experience cycle. And then I showed them, what does it mean to to go from connect and attract a consumer all the way to advocate and make the consumers advocates. But what I ended up doing was going from things that they might connect and use it more abstractly. And then I went the whole abstract consumer way. And I said, okay, so if you're a consumer, but you have different ways of behaving. So it's no longer about direct, like, oh yeah, cool graphics or cool this. It becomes about behavior. And what you're seeing here, all the matrices have multiple rounds because I had multiple teams. But then what I ended up doing is I told them, after we had done all these versions together, I said, now as a class, let's come up with a framework. And instead of me giving them a template for them to fill out, then they, and in this case, it was Molly, Brogan, and Angela, 3 students who the class voted to have their own framework to research another topic. And in this case, they decided that climate change had to be something to be researched by history, impact, solutions, constraints, motivations, human factors, et cetera. You're seeing the rest. But I use Miro because it's such an organic way for students to create, mash, change around. I did give them a template, but then they started saying, Alberto, what if we change the template this way? And I'd be like, go ahead, do it. That's what Miro is all there about. And the cool thing is that Miro tracks the interactions. So I could start seeing which were the students that were thinking more abstract, which were the students that were only entering content on the concrete, more traditional design definitions. And I did this early on in the class, so it allowed me to refine my vocabulary as the semester went on. And I identified areas that I knew that the students were gonna need help with. So anyway, just wanted to share something concrete since they were asking.
Thank you.
I have a question for, so this sort of, I love what Anne said about, looking forward to going back into the classroom, but also not wanting to give up that sort of flexibility of how we sort of offer our classes and do the things that we're doing. I'm interested, like I have a lot of trepidation going back onto campus, specifically because I love group work in classes. Design is collaboration. Design is with people. You're never in a vacuum. And so all of my classes implement group work in some way. I have no idea how to do that while you also try and do social distancing and sanitize everything, and what the hell am I going to do? And so I'm looking for, opportunities. How can we maintain this level of collaboration in a physical space in a safe way, or in a virtual space, but also in a physical classroom? If there's anybody has strategies for what might have worked and how they're thinking of transitioning, shifting back into the classroom with some of these successes through what we've used, what you got? I'm ready for some help here.
I guess I'm hopeful that that if I make a pact with my students and everyone agrees, we collectively agree to the value of different modes at different times, then it's not, no one's policing me. But I guess I have a dean and people that are obsessed with, in a university that's obsessed with in-person, and I just worry a little bit, if one person gets out of sorts, then I've taken a risk that's not worth it, but I probably will take it anyway. But again, I think it's about a collective agreement about what do we want to do with our time in the classroom. That's what I'm hoping. Or out of the classroom, I guess.
Elia?
Yeah, I'm actually, I would really like to go back in person. I feel much more connected when I am in the room. And even though it's more, let's say, convenient to stay at home, I know that I'm going to do a much better job, more satisfying too, when I am there with them. The fear that I have is if the modality of combining both in person, because some students, when I taught in person during the pandemic, they say, can I also connect? That's when it becomes difficult, because you cannot be aware or control the fact if they are really getting the content. And then you get so many emails and then you have to explain the process, because I usually go and answer, okay, what part is the part that is not clear, so I can help with that. I say, well, I didn't understand what you were trying to say. So that means I have to tell you the entire class through email. How am I going to be effective, right? So I try to say, okay, we all have to meet via Zoom. And then it's repeating everything when you have already done it. And sometimes I have said this, imagine you go to a restaurant, you ask for your food, and then you leave it there. And then you come back later and say, where is my food? Okay, it's gone, because you were not there when it was given, but they did what they were supposed to do. They followed what you wanted, they presented it to you, and then you chose not to have it. So that's what I'm trying to communicate in a way that they don't feel that I am not paying attention to what they need. But we also have to attend some other courses, some other classes. We need to eat, we need to go to the bathroom, right? So that's the part that I'm not sure, because all these combinations make it so much work, and I am not sure if we are really serving the student needs in an effective way.
So Anne, I'm going to go a little bit into the administrator hat here for a minute. So I'm glad I'm not in the room with any of you, so you can't throw anything at me. But if we all go digital, how can we argue the value to continue paying what we pay for education? I mean, all of our colleges have considerable investments in buildings that then would not be used, and that's not a debt that can be erased automatically. So that's and I'm not saying that it needs to be, because eventually the pedagogical experience is what needs to lead this, but there's a problem here into the debt that a system had committed to because nobody thought that it could be broken. Now we prove that it could be done differently, but there's going to be a lot of lag in up to the point that an institution can say, oh yes, I can do this, I can leave all of these assets out of the way, but also sell it to students that they're, how many more years will students pay what they pay in certain colleges? Not all of them, of course, to stay online. That's another question that I've been thinking for myself, because in the end, it directs back to our salaries and our way of life. And again, I know if we were in a room, I'd be seeing shit thrown at me and I'd be running away. But it is a concern, I think, especially when it comes to those assets. Those buildings cost a shitload of money. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are, embedded into investments that all of them went down this year.
Anne?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you're right. We don't have enough space, physical space, so this seems like a hybrid seems like it would actually help, because we don't have space. But I think what I'm interested in is really just letting the people teaching have, or at least a program even, have some flexibility to think about which modalities are best for which. When should we just be outside? When, we do that on nice days maybe, but could we think about it in relation to the pedagogy and the learning experiences that we want? When are we off-site? When are we virtual? When are we there in the room? And I do think my university is going to flip it around as fast as they can. As much as they want all in person, the connection, someone said this, is really outside of the classroom. Most of what the students are buying is the dorms, the clubs, all the stuff outside of the classroom. So they're going to, and they put cameras in all of our classrooms that pivot and record. The sound is horrible. So they're going to sell the stuff we make just as fast as they think we want it in the buildings. I feel like it's, these models are serious, and we do I think want to respect being in person, having value, especially with making and tactility and community. But I just think sometimes these top-down edicts that get put on us are somewhat not trusting the people on the ground.
You see, and we totally ruined the mood talking about administrative stuff. So I apologize, people. I apologize. Yeah, Creative Cloud is a huge one, David. I saw it in the chat. And I'll give you another, this year I've seen the move to alternative softwares, but as somebody who runs a studio, I had a student who came in and used Affinity. No way for him to interact with the rest of the studio. He didn't know the command. I mean, sadly we had to get rid of him because there was no way for him to integrate with the mechanics of a daily studio. And I'm an open-minded guy when it comes to technology, but I haven't found a solution on how could I migrate designers that operate in the Adobe infrastructure to those alternative softwares. That's going to be a challenge for this generation, because I see a lot of people anti-Adobe, but then how much lag can it happen that actually Affinity becomes mainstream? It's going to be complete.
Affinity is going to remain in the hobbyist landscape. Like it can't, I don't think it's going to break into the professional realm. But if you're someone who just, wants to hang out and mess with photos or have fun making little flyers and stuff for your church, like that's cool. But I don't think there's going to be straight up design studios running on Affinity. I think the software is interesting and it's actually really cool on an iPad setting. Way better than anything Adobe makes on an iPad setting, in my opinion. But on the Mac, it's not great.
Talking about successes and failures throughout this process of remote teaching. I teach at a public school in Cal State LA in the heart of Los Angeles, and our student population has no access to internet, to technology. We were lucky to get some funding from the state and from the federal government to provide laptops to students and Wi-Fi hotspots. But even with that, our entire design faculty, there's 2 tenure track professors and then just 19 to 21 adjunct lecturers because academia. And I had, as the option chair, I had to sit down with all of our design faculty and say, look, everybody, we got to talk about quality and what we can actually, require from students this semester or these semesters, what they're going to have access to, the capability that they're going to have. If you're teaching color and they're going to be taking photos of their work, how are we going to really judge quality of all these things? And so I think this year and a half has really, for me at least, exemplified the need to reassess what it is we care about as educators in this field, what our students really need to come out with in terms of knowledge and skills, and how we evaluate that work. Because I had students who are like, look, that photo is crap, but I can tell you put a lot of time into this. I can tell that the composition is there, even if it's at a bad angle and it's in dim lighting. And, there's, we'll work on presentation. But I know you're taking that with a Razr cell phone, right? Good luck. So I think for me, it was a great wake up call to say, what can I feasibly achieve, expect from my students? Where do I need to draw lines for quality? And how do I really implement the best learning strategies that when they do come out of this and when they do have access to things again, like computer labs and whatnot, will they be ready for that transition again? And will they have the skills for it? So that was my experience with saying, okay, that you obviously don't know how to set up a photo, so maybe I'll do a lecture on that, right? Maybe I'm going to attack some of these disparities that are so rife within our field. I don't have a question. That was just me ranting.
So Lisa, are you getting what you needed?
Oh yeah, this has been so great to hear everyone's experiences. And yeah, I feel like just for everyone too to connect and kind of understand that you're not alone in whatever you happen to be feeling. There's probably at least one other person, and most likely 12, that also feel the same way. But yeah, I guess if there aren't any more comments, we can start wrapping things up. But I mean, if there are any more comments, don't let me stop.
I have a comment on software, because I read Lisa's
Yeah.
thread where she's talking about Canva and all of these free softwares. You know, the issue from a business perspective is that if students just try software, they don't go into performance. They don't go into optimizing their time. And it is really frustrating to have designers, 2 years out of school, who things take so much longer, not because they're thinking, not because they're conceptualizing, just because they're doing it manually without thinking, oh, the software can actually do this for me. And that is for me a problem, because I want them to optimize their time in thinking, in conceptualizing, in strategizing in the studio, not going, I saw somebody, for example, the name badges that many of you have, that's linked to a spreadsheet, and Illustrator automatically does that and updates the artboards. I don't expect somebody going out of school to do that, but if they've been working, at least to have the understanding that you have to get into the software to make your work optimized, to use your time where it matters. And most of these softwares like Canva and cell phone and iPad softwares, they don't go deep. So even if you become an expert, then when you go into the ones that do have the, After Effects is a great example. We all know what we can do in After Effects, but if we stay in the superficial realm, everything takes like 70 hours to do. So it's just, I don't have an issue with affinity or anything like that. It's the performance issue. And again, not because I want to be a stickler in the studio, is I want them to use the time where it matters. I prefer to see them 5 hours in a sketchbook, thinking out a brand development and how the identity will play out. And then you take 3 hours to make it into the computer, versus being 7 hours, just putting type on, on 100 name tags, just because that's what you want to do. I mean, I just wanted to get the feedback behind my comments on the software, because in the end, it's about time optimization and really challenging the thinking.
Well, and as not a rebuttal, but a slight rebuttal, something I really try hard with all of them to do is to remember, if you're thinking to yourself, "What, this is taking a long time, there must be an easier way," please Google that thing.
Google it, yeah. Yes,
no matter what it
yes.
is, because there probably is, and someone else has thought the same thing, and you will find the thing. So that's really what I'm all about, no matter what they're using and what I allow them to do, just so that they can get through the thing. Because like I said, I don't teach only majors. I don't even have majors really right now. I'm building a program from scratch. So I have lots of students who are just minors, and they're taking it for fun, or they're adding it to their business degree, or they're a neuroscientist who wanted to take a design class. I don't hold them all to the same expectations. I can't. They're not all design students, right? So to me, making them all buy Adobe that they can't even run on their crappy laptops is just not a way forward. So Canva is fantastic because at least they can dip their toes in. But Alberto, I totally take your point. Students who do want to actually do this as a career, that's what they're signing up for, right? For now, Adobe's the thing. So it's all about finding that kind of balance, I think.
To just piggyback on this for half a second, I talk for longer, but whatever. I'm teaching an illustration course, and one of the requirements is exploration of different media. You have to learn these different tools. I'm not going to do a tutorial on gouache, watercolor, oil pastels, like all these different things, right? So instead, I created a structure where the students have to choose a media, have to choose a prompt out of 50 prompts that I wrote, that I stole a little bit from somewhere else, because that's what academics do. We repurpose. And I said, okay, look, you're going to do these things. I've got a Google Doc of references, right? Tutorials, YouTube videos, all these things, like books and references, like for you to learn. These are things you can Google yourself, right? Like, I'm not going to waste my time in class doing a tutorial for one person. Instead, I'm going to give you all these references. You're going to learn how to look things up because I'm not going to be there to baby you when you're out in the real world. You know, I want to teach you how to learn how to do something, and then you're going to practice that for the rest of your life because we're always constantly learning. And then I mirror that in my own work and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm gonna go look it up, and I'll be back at you next class period as an expert in the field, right? Give me 5 minutes on Google, and, and that's it. So I'm full with you.
Yeah, just to add to that, the thing I've found though is that the students don't know how to ask the right question on Google to find what they need to do. So that's part of the software training is that they'll ask me how to do something in class. And I'll say, well, let me show you how to look that up. And they don't have the terminology to look up to find out what they need to do in Illustrator to get it to do that. And
but Rick, I'm going to challenge that a little bit because if you've tried it yourself, right now, all you got to do is like Illustrator, letters, bands. And then the settings suddenly come. I mean, right. I get what you're saying, but Google has gotten so organic in that way that it's just the thinking of go to Google. I'm with Lisa. I just want them to go to Google and I bet you that they can figure it out. But it's just that going to Google is so like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all find with my students, I feel that it's a level of imposter syndrome where they're like somehow, some ways, for some reason, thinking that they should already know that. Like, I don't get it because I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like, I still need to look up. I opened After Effects for the first time in 5 years, like earlier this summer, right? I looked at one class on LinkedIn Learning, watched it for about 5 minutes, go, oh yeah, and then I went to work, right? So yes, model that is what I say in your classroom. Like, I'm gonna fully show you how much of an idiot I am so that you feel better about yourself.
Right.
And I'll say Adobe is prepped to be challenged any day now. I mean, just like it happened in architecture, AutoCAD is no longer the software. So if you don't know how to use Revit, you are out of the loop. And architects are going, they're tragically suffering through that. So I see them and I'm like, that's going to be us as soon as Affinity gets mainstream. But for now, it's really complicated because exactly. And Quark used to be the standard. It's still used in some parts of the world. And that's how my career started, designing character styles and paragraph styles for Quark. But it's interesting. Other disciplines have seen it. Who would have ever thought that AutoCAD was going to go out? And it did. And so now, Adobe is just, they need to kind of figure it out and start listening to us with those bloated softwares and make shit that runs again fast.
That's what I exactly tell students when they ask me, when I say, why are you taking this course since it is an elective? And they say, oh, I know how important visuals are and I want to learn InDesign and Photoshop. And I have written this before in the chat and I say, I want you to learn how to cook, not how to operate a stove. Because look, I come from the times in which I use an X-Acto knife and I slice my fingers. And then it was PageMaker, and then it was Quark, and then I went to CCI, and then to InDesign, and so many versions. If you know how to cook, you're going to cook using any stove. That's going to be easy. Mm-hmm. But if not, that's not, it's going to change and change and change. And I'm telling you that I have gone through all of that. And they say, oh no, again, another piece of software. But that's how life is, right?
But Elio, admit it, your life changed when you could drop a PDF directly into InDesign versus the damn EPSs from Quark. That made life so much better, objectively speaking, regardless of the software.
Yeah, no, that is true. And when they ask me how long do I take to come up with an idea, I say, that's not also magic. But of course, if you have a deadline, the idea has to come whether it is there or not. It's like this joke in my country is that in this house, we have sex at 8 p.m., whether you are here or not. Sorry if it is too graphic, but that's a deadline. But you also need to push your creativity to go and have it in some period of time. And at the end, that's what you have to produce and present.
Wow. Okay, well, with sex at 8 p.m., we are closing in on this session. Lisa, I would love if you could give us a final reflection on what you saw so that we can finish this session roughly on time.
Oh yeah, well, just thank you so much for sharing. And I think the things I saw from just kind of listening and observing is it's really complicated in all ways, but I think that the power too of community is something that, you know, is going to get us through and is going to keep us moving. And I think is ultimately going to inspire us. I mean, I think the power of community is, you know, kind of like the power of design that transcends the software or the stove or all those kind of things. So yeah, it's been great to see you all sharing and contributing. And I would encourage everybody to keep it up because we're not out of the woods in any way. So it's good that we have each other to kind of rely on and move forward. So thank you. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Rick. Lisa, I want to remind you that the Slack channel does not get canceled after the conference. The channels will be renamed. So after this research gets any sort of draft publication, please share it back because we would love to see what you're doing. And I want to remind you that tonight we still have one more mixer left. For those of you that were very interested in software appropriately, we're going to be talking about student-run studios in programs and how do we get students to interact with professional work. That'll be a very contentious session ran by Megan D. She has held a few sessions about this in the last year. Engagement has been very high in those. So if you like engaging sessions, I welcome all of you to come. That's at 7 p.m. It'll allow Elio to get to his 8 p.m. Meeting point. So we're good to go here. I want to thank all of you for having been here, and I hope that we see you later today. And don't forget tomorrow, important for those of you that came last year, tomorrow's program is completely different to what the closing day was. We do have sessions in the morning, and the closing session, which last year, it was really emotional, but it was not a community event. We're going to have Benny Johnson hosting, and we're going to be talking about the future of AIGA education and our program. So thank you so much again. Oh, Lisa.
And just one more quick note. There'll be one final mixer and then also a happy hour tomorrow. The mixer's in the morning called Flying Solo for design faculty who are the only design faculty at their place. I am one of those. I will be hosting that. Please come join me for about an hour at 9 a.m. Eastern time because we're going to be talking about all the things and we're going to start a support group. So come to that. And you don't have to be the only design faculty. Let's say you don't like the rest of your design faculty, or let's say you just feel very isolated where you are, you can come join us. So just wanted to shout out for that.
Fantastic. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for spending time with us and opening it for us, and thank the community for your continued support. See you in a bit.